we now have a dynamite panel for you all. This is going to be incredible. Let's see who we have. This is a really special panel for me. How many of you here, like, once in a while need to look for a new job? Yeah? How many of you need to, like, file taxes? Hopefully everybody. Yes? How many of you need to look up where you're going on Google Maps? Yeah, so this panel is literally building products that does all these things for us and makes our lives better. So without further ado, I would love to introduce these awesome people and welcome them onto the stage. We have Dan Olsen, the author of the Lean Product Playbook. We have Kayla Armstrong, who's a senior product manager at SoFi. We have Rose Yao, who's the director of the location APIs at Google Maps. We have David Marble, who's the group product manager for the Intuit Small Business Group. And we have Christine Lee, who's the director of product at Hired.com. With that, I hand it over to Dan.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hi.
All right. Well, I know we're all really excited to be here. We're going to not do Q&A, but we're all going to stick around afterwards, just so you guys know. So we'll be around to ask questions, OK? But first, I thought rather than me introducing people, just give each person a chance to introduce themselves briefly. Just give a quick overview of your background and what you're working on. That would be great.
Okay.
Want to start, Kayla?
Hi, I'm Kayla Armstrong. I am currently a senior product manager at SoFi. Before that, I did product at a mortgage startup called Clara Lending. And before that, I was a data architect at Bridgewater Associates, which is known for its principles.
Nice. Real quick, who's read the book Ray Dalio's Principles book? OK, cool. If you haven't read it, you should check it out. Cool. Rose.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Rose Yao. I am currently a director of product on the Google Maps API side, now rebranded to Google Maps Platform just 2 weeks ago. Before that, I've spent the last 12 years on the consumer side of product. So consumer products on Google, like Gmail, at Facebook, like Photos, and Engineer by Heart a long time ago.
Awesome. Dave.
Hi, David Marble. I'm a group product manager at Intuit. I work on data platforms and marketing technology. Used to be a little more on the customer-facing side, doing mobile apps, and former engineer, ex-lawyer, tried a bunch of stuff, ended up in product. I hear that a lot. Looking forward to the conversation.
I'm Christine Lee, and I've been PMing for about 15 years. So I've worked on consumer products, SMB products, enterprise products at companies of all different sizes. I'm currently at Hired, which is a startup, where I'm responsible for the candidate experience and internal tools. And before that, I was at Twitter, Intuit, and 2 enterprise companies that were both acquired by Oracle.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. Great. And real quick, I'm Dan Olsen. I'm the moderator today. I'm a product management consultant and also the author of the Lean Product Playbook, which Brent gave me a great plug for. So thanks. I appreciate it. We're here at Amplitude's event. And so today we're going to be focusing our panel discussion on 2 things, analytics and roadmaps. And we're going to start out with analytics. So I thought we could start out with sharing maybe how your team uses product analytics at your company. Anybody who wants to jump in?
OK, I'll start.
Yeah.
So obviously, Google has been data-driven, the 37 shades of blue, right, for a while, right? Google Analytics, lots of products. So I think the key thing here probably for us to talk about is, I would say, my personal opinion, and a lot of teams that I've been part of, data is an important part of the equation, but it's not the only part, right? So kind of like what we talked about in the last chat, you have to have an opinion as a product manager, and then data is a great way to validate that opinion, especially at scale.
Awesome.
Well, I think that obviously you look at your product analytics for the online experience. You can diagnose what are the opportunities, what are things you need to improve. But a lot of times analytics help you as like a little bit of a decoder ring. So for example, at Hired, once a candidate gets an interview and accepts it, they go off into the real world, and you don't know exactly what happens. And so we use analytics to try to understand, like, if we're seeing time to hire fluctuate, what is going on? Is it because the candidate's taking a long time to schedule the interview? Is it they're not passing the interviews? Like, we try to use the data to triangulate what the problem is.
Nice. Yeah, so basically building on what Brent was saying about qual informs quant, and awesome. How about Intuit?
Similar. In so many ways, we're on a journey at our company. We often tout that we have some excellent financial data about so many people and a wonderful level of trust that we've gained over many decades for not using the data for any ill purposes. And yet, we focus so much on the qualitative aspects of our customers, almost overly so. So we're on a journey to move the dial from being overly customer empathy driven to, you don't want to remove that, but add on the lens of how do I add in data as a validation as well as an input to the visioning that I'm doing all along the product roadmap. So.
Yeah, so we have 3 Intuit alums. I was an Intuit alum, Christine and Dave.
I didn't know it was going to be a love fest.
I know, you know. But the fact that different companies have different DNA and focus on quant or qual, and I like to call, just to give it a name, the quant is like the Spock perspective.
Nice.
And the qual is the Oprah perspective, because she's the best at interviewing people, right? Who here would say they're more of a Spock? They prefer quantitative data here. Who's more of a... All right. There's the guy. That's kind of an Oprah thing to do, to clap to that. Okay, that's cool. You're supposed to go like that. All right. How about Oprah's? How many qualitative people are
I got
okay, we got a lot of people that didn't vote. How about who wants both? Who's ambidextrous here? Oh, okay, that's what I see. They're buying into it, so cool. Nice.
Our stock's going up, so yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
Yeah. So when I was at Clara Lending, which was the mortgage startup, we focused a lot on the mortgage application funnel. For us, it was a good way to get signal on what the opportunities for improvement were within our product. And so in the mortgage application process, there's this one big screen where you have to put in your social security number and get your credit pulled. That's a very scary step for most people. And so we were able to run different experiments to see what kind of messaging, what kind of design, what kind of flow would actually encourage people to take that leap of faith and put in their social security number, because it's a big trust game.
Definitely. No, and I have an example I talk about in my book about where I had to optimize a conversion rate for a multi-step financial application process. And so using quant, we could figure out where's the biggest drop-off. And I like to say quant shows you where the smoke is, but you don't know what the cause of the fire is. And then you switch to qual and kind of figure out what's causing the fire. So awesome. Okay, cool. Well, one thing, who here has heard of the term North Star metric? All right, cool. So this is like a hot new term that's going around. I really love it. I think my friend Sean Ellis, he's the guy that coined the term growth hacker. He actually coined that term. And Amplitude Analytics has an awesome blog post they wrote, I think, about 2 months ago on it. And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about North Star metric. So for those of you that have a North Star metric, can you share what it is and how you use it and why it's valuable?
I can start. For us, it's placements. So we're a marketplace that connects candidates and companies. So for us, success means that somebody got a job and took it.
I forgot to mention the North Star metric, for those of you who don't know, it's like a single metric that captures how you create value for customers. So for Hired, that makes perfect sense that you're connecting people. So awesome. Other North Star metrics?
Yeah, for us, it's the number of members who take more than one product with us. So we offer student loans, mortgages, soon banking. And what we're really trying to do is build a long-term relationship with our members. And one of the best indicators is to see whether they trust the SoFi brand enough and have received good enough service in order to take out multiple products with us.
Awesome.
So I think the interesting thing here for me is actually, we've been talking about this a lot as a team, right? Like the single metric that rules them all, right? And what that does for a team, right? So ours on the enterprise side is revenue, right? And it's a very simple one to get around. But we've actually decided to add another metric that is equally important, which is customer happiness, or in this case, NPS. Because I think, in my experience, it's been very dangerous to focus on that single metric, because you lose track of, where you make a lot of short-term decisions, right? And maybe you lose track of the other side of it. So like in the past, we've done page views or engagement. And those are actually pretty easy metrics to game in the short term, but it may actually lead to bad decisions or long-term retention problems, right, for a product. So actually, like, I always say it's a pair of metrics, right? if
So
you can
the
get to that
binary
nuance.
star system.
Yeah,
We
the
heard it here
binary
first,
star.
guys. North Star, dead. Binary
North
star,
Star
you need
and
2
South
metrics.
Star.
All right, good. North Star and South Star, excellent. It's a constellation, really. I see.
Just two.
Got it.
Just
Okay, it's 2. Okay.
I joked with the panel that we do a live coaching session and help me come up with a North Star metric
That's
for
right.
my whole company.
That's right. Well, we had said if you don't have one, what advice do you have for
Sure.
people that are
I-
interested and want to set one?
We do,
Yeah.
for the most part, I think we focus quite a bit recently. We're in a huge growth phase right now, which is atypical for Intuit. We've gone through various phases over time, been around for a while, and we're in quite a ramp up, at least with our online QuickBooks product for running small businesses. So of late, it's been our gross new subscribers, how many people are subscribing to the platform, and the 90-day retention, some kind of a window of, all right, you got on board, we keep you there for some degree, some amount of time.
Nice. Yeah, I think, so retention is, I think, key for a lot of people. Depends on the stage that you're in. I guess
Yes.
part of it is your North Star metric. So early on, retention is definitely more important than squeezing revenue and things
Hey,
like that.
don't, it's not squeezing, it's
That's
value.
Sorry, no,
Right.
no, optimizing. Sorry, optimizing revenue. Optimizing revenue. Yes, right. Nice. Cool. So now we know everyone's North Star metric. Can you talk a little bit about how you use it? How does it go in practice on your teams? You know, how does it actually help make decisions and, you know, provide value for your teams?
We, in many ways, of late, are going through a phase. Well, there's the data phase. We're also going through the how do you marry together the growth mindsets that often are essential in a small business. You get bigger and bigger, and marketing sometimes grows a little bit away from the product division. So we're coming back around now and linking arms and saying, well, now that we're in a growth phase again, how do we decide to link arms on what product matters to push for that growth? So those North Star kinds of metrics, new subscribers, and can we keep them at least for some predetermined amount of time, puts us both kind of on the same track to be delivering both an excellent product and pushing for business results.
No, that's a great point, that a North Star team, across multiple teams, and as you get bigger, I guess it helps people be more focused on the same outcomes. That's cool. Anybody else have examples of using a North Star metric? Or in general, I guess just using analytics to help improve, you know, your product or business?
The North Star is really like something like when you're watching a game, you're keeping score, so you know if you're going the right direction. And you know, obviously, we break down the North Star into you have your usage metrics, your growth metrics, and your other outcome metrics that hopefully lead to the ultimate placements. So everything sort of gets broken down at a lower level, and we'll cover that in product reviews, for example.
Got it. Cool.
For us, it's really the starting point of the framework that we use to build our roadmap, which is another topic we are going to be
right.
covering. We actually split out our North Star metric into 3 main pillars. One is around community, one is around financial literacy and habits, and the other one is around financial products. And so we try to use this framework to inform every single item that we put onto our roadmaps, and so we can tie back every line of code to why we're building it.
Nice.
Cool. Well, I think if anybody has a specific example of using analytics, that would be awesome to hear, maybe, if you guys have one. Like where we said, okay, this is what we measured, and we wanted to make it better. Anyone got an example they can share under NDA? We're all going to keep it private. Okay, cool.
I think, so I also spend a bit of time on Facebook, right? So I think one of the interesting thing is actually kind of how we're talking about different stages of a product, you need different metrics. So it's how kind of metrics have evolved, right? And teams have refined. So originally, friending was a huge metric for Facebook. So number of connections that you're making, right? And it makes a lot of sense when Facebook's growing. And then, the team realized, well, that wasn't enough, right? And actually, there might be some very spammy behavior. I don't know if you guys remember the MySpace days where people were competing on like the number of friends they could have, right? And things like that. So they were like, okay, it's really about the quality of connection. So it was like number of, there was a definition of good friending, right? And then after that, it became about, I think friends that you were the kind of the relationship you have with your friends, right? How many do you actually retain? How many are you actively engaged with, right? To measure the quality of that connection. So that, I think, is a nice evolution that describes how, as your product evolves, think about evolving your metric and analytics, right? And the data will tell you. So I think part of it is just don't blindly look at a graph that is going up and to the right. Really think about what that actually is doing to the quality of your product and the experience that your users or customers are having, right? And be brave enough to suggest that this isn't the right metric anymore, right?
Maybe just to add on to that, I think it's helpful when you're scoping out an opportunity to just be upfront about what should the anti-metric be, because a lot of times you're really focused on what does success look like, but it's also like, well, what could really break,
Yeah.
and have a counterpoint to track.
And then we have matter, antimatter now. This is we're getting very physical here. It's great. Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think that some of the articles in North Star Metric, they bring up the point you did, which is if you myopically focus on one, other things can fall apart. And so there's like, that's the one you're trying to grow up into the right, and there are other ones you got to keep your eye on and make sure you don't kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater as you're optimizing that one. Yeah.
I think one of the most essential aspects of in a long-lived company with product that has just feature creeped over a very long time. We're a productivity tool, so sometimes simplicity is not what we've gone after. And one of the best outcomes often of instrumenting properly has been the hard decisions of what to remove from a product to get back to a simplifier. So having somebody fail faster and somehow celebrating that was okay when you put all that hard work into a new feature, have that as a muscle in your company is super valuable. Proper analytics helps you get there.
No, that's true. And I think, there's certain companies, the products have been around a long time, like Intuit or Microsoft or Adobe. And it's tough. And this happens at enterprise all the time, too. It's like, hey, we have to refactor our code base. Like, okay, sales is like telling you have to replicate every feature in the V2, but you can use analytics to figure out what you can cut. You realize, hey, no one's using this. We can cut it. So, cool. Why don't we switch gears to talk about product planning? How do Ado's analytics play into their product planning decisions that you make with your teams?
Intuit has such a history of doing storytelling, and storytelling is so vital to selling anything, selling a vision, selling a feature. I often think how deep customer empathy can sell a story. Data mixed with that customer empathy, it seals the deal. Your vision is taken. And that's kind of at the selling a vision for something to happen. On the other side of that, especially in the product review and strategy, if there isn't an output metric that's being driven towards, it's a non-starter. It's not on the roadmap then. There must be something defined as this is what will be the success out of that, and a way to measure it so that it can feed back into making those decisions.
Cool. You also want to talk about product planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us have our struggles with product planning, right? How much planning to do, how little planning to do, to how lean you go, right? Versus how long the roadmaps are, right? And I will say I've done a variety of different things throughout my career, from the 2-week sprints, right, type of mentality to, really year-long roadmaps, right? The key, I think, is to realize, what was it? What's the quote? Some version of like, you have to plan for the battle, but realize that everything's going to change once, you start doing things, right? So I would say, as product managers, one is just get comfortable with ambiguity and change, right? But two, realize you do have to plan, because it makes you think critically about the problem, right? It makes you think critically about what success looks like, why you're doing something, and like we talked about, how to rally a group of people who do not report to you, who do not have to do what you say, right? I think that's the key thing. So right now, we're probably in more of a quarterly process, right? This is sort of the standard for Google. As Naomi said, we try to do the company goals all the way down to the individual goals and the alignment, right? So it is expensive, right, to a certain extent. And the key is to make sure that your high-level goals and mission don't change that often. The tactics change, but the mission doesn't. And then find the right tools for your team to do this on an ongoing basis. So for me, we have weekly product reviews, right? It is the team who sets the agenda, who decides what comes to that, right? And design reviews and postmortems, right? Those are good checkpoints for how you make sure that you're actually going to where you want to go, and then kind of a quarterly gathering of how did we do, right?
Cool. Yeah, and I think you're basically what you brought up is you can be too rigid in your planning, whether it's too far in advance or not open to change. Or I've seen some people go, "Hey, we're agile anyway. Like, who needs a plan? Like, let's just go every 2 weeks." Right? So you can be too flexible. So striking that
Exactly.
balance, which
Yeah.
again changes as your company grows and matures. Yeah, great points.
I think for us, if we start an initiative by talking about how we're going to measure it, it actually helps us get way more specific about the problem. So we can talk about like, okay, so is this a problem? There's a statement here. And then once we start talking about what are the things we look at and why they would be indicative of success, this actually opens up a much broader conversation. And we get great input from design, great input from engineering, and also product, customer support, sales, where they can chime in and say like, hey, here are some behaviors that I'm observing that should affect the success of this. And so we can actually talk about what specific behaviors we would look at as it feeds into our North Star metric and our company goals.
That's a good point, which is if everyone's clear on the goals and the key metrics, then they can independently come up with ideas on the fly. Everyone's empowered to come up with ideas that will help support it, as opposed to just being told what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us, I mean, I guess the way I look at planning is when you're doing a roadmap, you're looking ahead, but you're also looking back, and you're trying to choose where you're going to prioritize. It is all about trade-offs.
Trade-offs.
But I think you have different horizons, and so some of it is just it's nice to sort of get your head back up above water and think about, okay, what is the mission? Where are we trying to go? And then you just go back to basics. Who are the users? What are the jobs to be done? How well are we doing those in a differentiated way? But then you can go back into the actual roadmap and think about, am I working on the right initiatives? And I try to just get that part right, and then you can like get into the details of how you sequence it. And day to day that might change, but you don't want your overall work streams to change too much because it's just too much churn.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. We get so sucked into the tactical and day to day. Everything is short term that planning and road mapping is like just carving out time to think ahead and think longer term and bigger picture. Yeah, that's great. All right, we'll switch into roadmaps then. Let's talk about roadmaps. Can you share how you guys create roadmaps on your team with some advice for the audience?
Who doesn't love road mapping?
Who loves road mapping?
Oh, wow.
Pull up the
Wow.
Let's do one right now. I'm feeling that need.
What product are we building?
Who says screw it? Continuous deployment. No plan. All right.
Nice.
Well, I mean, you need a roadmap. I mean, at some level, you need a roadmap. And I think it does depend on, like, how big your organization is and where you are in the process. But everybody needs a basic plan. And I think that for us, because it's a marketplace, if I'm doing a roadmap, it's not just what my team is going to do. It's very much, well, how is that going to impact the other side? And then, we use AI for matching. So what are the things that I can do that inform the learning that we do to get to better matches and ultimately like get to better placements? So a lot of this is like a lot of collaboration, a lot of working through what end-to-end impact am I going to have for my plan, because you can't affect a lot of times the impact you want to have unless all these other dependencies are met.
Got it.
I think that's actually a really interesting point around the dependencies, right? Which is we have roadmaps for our teams, right? And that is just mostly, I always say to my PM team, we should be, at least like 2 months ahead of engineering, right? No matter what, because we never want to waste time where we don't know what we're building, or we haven't validated, right, our ideas or gotten to that definition MVP we feel confident, right? But then there is, as complicated as products and teams grow and companies grow, you have dependencies which are just longer. So I worked in a hardware startup for a while, right? And I had these really hard conversations with my hardware VP. He's like, what's going to happen a year from now? And I'm like, we are a pre-product market fit startup. I have no idea, right? And you had this really awkward exchange where he's like, well, I need to plan capacity in my factory. I need to plan like manufacturing and board designs. How do you do that, right? So sometimes we don't have the luxury of being ahead of that, right? But I think knowing what your long poles are and planning for that and being able to say, even without absolute certainty, here's where our vision is. Here's the 3 most likely areas that we're going to invest in. Here's how that might impact these teams, whether it's hardware, data, right, AI, right? This is what do you think? How would you invest in your team or technology based on that? I think that actually is something that we often forget in the tacticals of sprint planning and setting metrics, right? Just what those are, and they can become very big gotchas, right? Which I'm sure we've all experienced at some point.
I once took a time-lapse set of screenshots of a visual of our roadmap over, it was probably about a 6 to 9 month period when I was running a mobile apps team, and then played it back for folks to watch as these bars just kept pushing out and pushing out and pushing out and pushing out. I've thought to myself over the years, at least at a big software company, what's the purpose of the roadmap? I'd say probably 20% is the must do, must align, must get something done, we got to do. The other 80%, I've learned it's an inspiration.
It's aspirational.
It's to keep us going. Let dreamers dream.
Nice, nice.
Right?
Has anyone ever had more than one version of the roadmap to show to different constituents?
Ooh.
Just saying, you're living in this world. This is the world we're living in, yeah?
Is that how you run
That comes
products?
up. Which one do you like? No, this comes up a lot in B2B, the thing between internal and external. Because you don't want to so internally you want to have those stretch goals with the team, but heaven forbid someone from sales gets it and sends it to a customer. Like, hey, you were going to have real-time processing in March 1st, it says what happened, right? So I've seen that as one valid use case, but I'm just curious if anybody else lives in 2 realities, binary realities. To go with your binary metrics, we're going. No?
I actually maintain 2 roadmaps. One is around high quality commitments because there are other teams, marketing, legal, who depend on us to deliver things at a certain time.
Your external roadmap. That's your external roadmap.
That's my external roadmap.
Yeah.
This is the things that the other groups care a lot about. And then I have the other roadmap, which is more around business outcome rather than deliverables, and that is how we achieve the metrics that we set out to achieve at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the quarter. And it's very important to separate these because they have very different approaches.
Definitely. Yeah, and the commitment stuff can be more date-driven, and I love you just brought up the other topic we're going to talk about, which is historically, roadmaps have been all about features and when you're going to deliver these features. And we've talked a lot about metrics and outcomes. And I think I've seen more and more people doing more outcome-based metrics, like, hey, this is our growth roadmap, this is our retention roadmap. So can we talk a bit about how you get a team to focus more on, outcomes versus outputs? Any advice you have?
Well, I think, it starts with the user empathy. Like as much as you can get your team to go out and do the qualitative, meet the team, read the NPS feedback, and feel the pain of get back to the real world of what is the problem that you're trying to solve for them. But then tactically, once everyone is steeped in why that matters, I think that operationally, I find it helpful to actually not be the one always reporting on how things are doing. Have the engineer do it, have the designer do it.
That's a great idea.
And then there's just a lot more accountability because you're asking them to share how did we do, what did we learn, and I feel like that helps a lot for the PM to actually try not to be the presenter all the time.
I think that's a great idea. So you're not the messenger because they don't report to you, and everyone's responsible for the results. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Early on in some of the versions of the questions we thought about talking about was what's one word to describe where your focus is currently, and I was going to say unity, very much along the lines of this. at Intuit, we often will throw our developers out to the customer interviews, like go do it yourself. And oh man, the revelation that comes from that experience, aligning folks around, we sometimes will say it's a triad. I hate the word because it makes me think of, I don't know, a Japanese gang or something like that. But a product manager, a product developer, and a designer.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming a quad and a quintet and a sextet as we've got marketer, potentially analyst who's
The
data
full stack
geek.
team that Naomi was talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
Yes. But getting all those folks together and aligning on what's the customer benefit we're delivering out of all of this gets you focused on those, well, the North Star metrics and business goal rather than simply are we shipping this, are we shipping that? So we try to do that regularly.
I think that's awesome. I've never thought about this before, like a unity metric. Like how unified is your team on a scale of 0 to 100?
Are we coming up with a new
right?
blog
Yeah,
post for
I
you? Is
yeah,
that-
I don't know. Yeah, I'm saying. We got binary metric, but seriously, like a unification. Like how well are we doing on unity? Like that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think that so let's say you have a fairly mature product, because I actually think that's when particularly a metrics-driven, right, outcome-driven roadmap becomes very interesting, right? So you're driving, the number of photos shared a day or the number of users, right, that you're acquiring. What I've had teams do is actually go through all the ideas. So there's a wide blue sky brainstorming of what are experiments we could run, what are things we could do. They go from removing friction to new features to optimization of a flow or funnel, and then actually go through the exercise of saying, okay, what is the cost of building this? And then what is the potential benefit? So forcing that diligence a little bit earlier in the process and using that to create the roadmap. Of course, you always have a portfolio approach where you're saying, I want at least, and you can decide whether it's 20, 50, 80% of your energy to be on big bets, right? Like Brent's saying, be brave, be bold, because that's how you get big changes, versus the, obvious optimization bets, right? How much of that, and what do you think the likelihood of the outcome will be when you add those things together? Now, that's like a very analytical, data-driven approach to that. The other side of it is I just had, an eng manager we're going through a little bit of transition on the team, and he's having the team, from a grounds up say, what are the things that they want to be accountable for? What are the products they own? What are things they're excited about building, right? And it's a very long list, right? It's a 2-pager with like a lot of bullet points, right? So the question, he's like, what do you think? And the question I asked him is like, here's some tactical feedback, but really, can we go through each bullet and say, how does it contribute to one of these key metrics, or our North and South stars, right? Why does it matter, right? And I think that's another way of thinking about it.
No, I think it's great. It ties back to Naomi's causality point, too. Great. All right, we're running out of time, so this has been an awesome discussion about analytics roadmaps. I thought we could close out with just each of us sharing a quick tip for product manager. It could be about analytics roadmaps or anything else, but if you have a word of wisdom to share from your career, maybe a mistake to avoid or some positive advice, let's share it.
Please.
For me, just to think about the inclusiveness of your product. You're probably serving very diverse users, and to just make a point to think about how your product is going to be used across very different kinds of users, not just the segments you come up with, but literally the diversity of users.
Cool.
I'd say add to your affirmation time every morning, I can say no. If I could just get that in every PM I work with, our world would be so much happier.
I got T-shirts made up that say no for one of my clients. PMs can just walk around and be like, yep.
I like that. I like that.
I would say hire people who are smarter than you that you want to be stuck at the airport with.
Nice.
I would just say focus on the problem.
I like that. Definitely focus on the problem. Cool. Well, thanks again to those awesome panels. It's been great. Please join me in giving a round of applause here. And we'll be hanging out. We'll be hanging out to answer questions here over a drink.